Where Loyalties Lie, Honor Guard, by Loyalliar. Chapter 4, Unwelcome. Honor Guard Master Sergeant Thundercrack shuffled idly in his armor. It was a nervous tick from a lifetime earlier, which he had earned as a colt facing down his first experience with a commanding officer. He hadn't felt the uncomfortable shiver in years. To take his mind off the thought, he glanced down at his golden armor. All the straps were in the right place. The little colored patches of his awards and honors sat in perfect standard rows at his left shoulder. He would have impressed even the most sensitive of inspections, though there was no risk that he would have to face one. The last one was a long time ago. It had been ages, even, since he had been given row quivering recruits. The doctors shuffled past him one by one, bickering amongst themselves. He only caught one word. Hopeless could have described his thoughts as well, but for a very different subject. When the palace infirmary finally emptied, he summoned up the strength of a soldier's body and walked into the sanitized room. He outright ignored the dying princess at the far end of the room. It was the greatest kindness he could bring himself to give. He knew of the poison coursing through her veins, and the assassin that had put it there. His duty told him he ought to be hunting down Masquerade. A deeper, nameless feeling shouted he ought to simply leave, throw away his armor and his honors in favor of a free life. Ultimately, he ignored both, in favor of the tiny voice that he had foolishly labeled loyalty. Thundercrack called himself as the perfect guards pony, yet when he had given his orders, he refused them outright. He had shared choice words with Soldier On, knowing that they were not the first she had endured in recent hours. Though she was a fine comrade, the new captain had not earned his loyalty. He had taken softer, more desperate words from a softer and more desperate mare to bring him to where he stood. No pony could resist the princess. His solid steel shoes clicked on the linoleum beneath his hooves as he approached his prey. She was sporting, in a sense, but not in the way the guard's pony was meant to be shaped. Dense soldiers supported the most well-toned set of wings the sergeant had ever seen. They were built for flying fast and hard, and taking the straightened pulls of tight turns and tight spaces. Unfortunately, the rest of the mare was thin and light and shapely. A decade earlier, he knew his heart would have fluttered for her, and a familiar heat would have built across his body and within his nethers. She truly was cute, even with her untidy exterior. He had known lots of beautiful mares, though, and in time even settled for the less than gorgeous ones. His eyes could only see her as a dumb kid who didn't belong. He steeled himself and glanced down a nearby window at the orange tint on the horizon, where the sun was about to rise. His best guess was 5:30 in the morning. A real guard's pony would have been up. Instead, the mare, no, the filly, lay snoring away on a medical cot.
"Wake up, Private!"
he ordered, in a plain speaking volume. Rainbow Dash didn't even stir. Irritated, the sergeant placed a hoof on the side of the bed and shook it.
"Up, now!"
The motion was enough to get Rainbow to idly scratch her muzzle, though it failed to end her slumber. Thundercrack took a deep breath, trying to keep his blood pressure low, as his doctor had ordered weeks earlier. It wasn't an uncommon problem for a 36-year-old stallion, but seemed to fit perfectly with a former drill sergeant. Finally, he felt he was ready.
"Where's the sun, Beckett?"
he bellowed at the top of his lungs as he thrust the filly onto the floor with both his forehooves. She screamed a rather satisfying note and collapsed in a bundle of feathers and fabric onto the floor. It took a moment for her to pull herself together enough to even speak. As she struggled to lift her left wings and right wing from the coil of sheets, she finally managed words.
"Geez, you think I don't recall giving you permission to speak, Private? Now on your hooves and attention, now!"
It seemed like sheer shock of everything was enough to get her to obey. She finally pulled herself free, staggered a few steps, and then stood with her hooves together, puffing out her chest. Thundercrack shied. It wasn't worth shouting over, but it did remind him just how far he had to go.
"That, Private, is the worst attention sense I've ever seen. Check your wings properly, first!"
He waited as she glanced back to realize that her left wing was sticking out to the side lazily. She reached back, smacked it, then pulled it to the side. That good?
"First rule of being a guard's pony, filly. Do not speak to me, your superior officer, unless spoken to!
The filly sort of took on a sort of funny grin. Thundercrack knew that smile all too well. It has been his life's work to lure it out of young recruits, tie it down, and strangle it in front of their eyes. It was the grin of a pony who thought they were above the change of command. It was the first thing that had to go in a good guard's pony. Buddy, I had Spitfire for a drill sergeant. I know how to handle drill sergeants. Before he could address it, Rainbow Dash spoke again. What makes you think that you're my superior?
My name is Sergeant Thundercrack, but you can call me Sergeant Crack or Sir. If you call me Sarge, I will put you on the floor. Understood?
On any normal pony, the threat would have been enough to earn submission. When the smile spread across Rainbow Dash's face, Thundercrack wondered just what sin he had committed to be saddled with her training. Yeah, so you're some sergeant. Big deal. I'm Luna's bodyguard, right? Doesn't that make me the same rank as... 2 seconds later, Rainbow was lying on the floor, silently clutching a shallow gas beneath her left eye. Thundercrack glanced down and noticed a tiny line of sweet red wrapped around the edge of his hoof. Regrettable, he didn't mean to strike so hard. Perhaps his control was fading.
Don't compare yourself to the commander. You aren't fit to lick a Sue's fillet.
He stood there in silence, floating in her hatred. The warm burning of her eyes brought back old memories, and not all of them were good. Part of him wanted to cry, part of him wanted to laugh. He still wanted to walk away. The soldier, though, stayed put to fulfill his orders, even amidst seeing through her hatred. He offered her a leg to pull herself up. Rainbow glanced down at the leg, still stained with the hoof of her own blood. Her nose wrinkled to the sight, and she rose to her own hooves without his aid. She stood with her legs wide, wings folded.
Attention!
He ordered. This time, he didn't have to wait. She slammed her rear legs together so hard that a clap rang out around the room. Her wings compressed even more tightly against her sides. She stared blankly over his shoulder, to something at the back of the infirmary. It was good enough for Sergeant Crack. He paced silently in and out of her line of sight as he spoke, his hooves tapping out a familiar 7-step pair.
Understand this. You are nothing like the commander. You are a little filly with a magic necklace that thinks she's a hero. You are never going to be a real guard's pony, no matter what the princess says. You might be a bodyguard, yet your princess title does not mean anything to me or the rest of the honor guard. Do you understand?
Rainbow's answer was hollow and deflated, with a tinge of bitterness. Yeah.
Yes, what, filly?
Yes, sir! She corrected with biting sarcasm. He offered her a glare to prove he hadn't noticed her tone, though he hadn't the will to correct her.
Good. As of today, you are technically a private in the Equestrian Honor Guard. Your flank is mine for the next 24 hours!
Jeez. Philly fire alert! Dash muttered under her breath.
What was that, private?
Shouted Crack. I said, what happens then?
I'm sorry, did that sound like a question?
Thundercrack thrust his face so close to Rainbow's that he could feel her slow, steady breath on his curly white coat.
You do not speak without permission!
In the silence that followed, the sergeant took a deep breath and pulled himself away from Rainbow. He could smell determination on her. Her obedience was meant to spite him, to be a slap to his face. He didn't mind. He could live with her loathing, as long as he got results.
I have been given 1 day to teach you how to fight. 1 measly day in which I'm expected to take a civilian, bring her up to the level of the very best of the guard. It's impossible.
He began pacing, again, paying more attention to the colored band of armors on his arm than to Rainbow's stance.
But because I am a guard's pony, and they are my orders, I will try.
He stopped to draw emphasis to his next words.
You can quit at any time if this life becomes too much for you. The princess told me to tell you that. You can consider listening to her. Now, do you have anything to say?
Rainbow took a long silence before nodding slowly. If I'm going with you, who's going to guard Princess Luna? Thundercrack was taken aback by the question. It seemed so ridiculous that it took him more than a few moments to muster up a blunt, factual response.
No pony's going to try anything now.
That's what Twilight said right before Luna was attacked. I promised Celestia I wouldn't leave her side. The guard's pony shook his head.
She will be fine. Now come with me, little filly, and remember, titles. You aren't familiar enough with the princess to just use her name.
Rainbow stood her ground, shaking her head. I'm not leaving her. The sergeant groaned aloud, and his eyes scanned the infirmary. It was a wide enough room for his purpose, though the doctors would be mad.
If you intend to serve on the honor guard, it will be by going out into the world and finding her a cure, not by standing around protecting her while she is already dying. We can stay here for now, but if you are so insistent, you are going to have to get over yourself. At least come over here and stand in the middle of the room with me.
Why?
Even when you are given permission to speak, you do not question orders!
Thundercrack gestured to the open space in the center of the room, and then raised the hoof up to his helmet. Almost idly, he tossed the princess's golden guard aside, revealing his true face. The perfect white stallion faded, revealing a head broader and flatter than the ideal face of the illusory guard's pony. His mane was cropped incredibly short, colored a dark forest green. The mares he had known throughout his life told him it went well with his patchy olive coat. His left forehoof then reached across his chest to the opposite shoulder of his armor. With a single tug, he unlatched his defenses and let him clatter to the ground. His hooves moved next to his ankles, snapping off his steel shoes. Finally disarmed, a single stride was all it took to step away from the pile of collected armor he had left behind. The older Pegasus had to fight to keep his face grin. His every muscle ached for the joy of battle, even if his mind guaranteed that the filly across from him stood no chance.
Now, Private, I want you to attack me. Show me what you got!
In here? Dash looked up at the ceiling. I can't fly in here.
So, you're only good fighting inside. You can't manage a hallway or a cave or just about anywhere you actually fight some pony.
No! The mare shouted defensively. He had a sore spot with her pride. She forced herself up onto her hind legs, staring her body with flaps of wings. I can do this. Just watch. Thundercrack stifled a laugh. Her pose was the most ridiculous stance he had ever seen. Certainly he heard of those napalm ponies who would fight standing up that way, but she was so far from their grace that he imagined he could knock her over by flapping a wing in her direction. He bent his knees, lowering his center of gravity, and he tightened his wings against his back. She tried to stare him down, but a life fighting boars, griffins, dragons, and criminal ponies left him cold to her hollow glare. He took a step forward, and then another. She jumped forward, using her wings for an extra push, and threw a foot for his head. He sidestepped the wide, obvious attack, and gave the filly a punch to the belly for its effort. It wasn't a very solid hit. She was fast. When she spun and hit him in the side of the neck, he observed just how fast. In the process of the split moment, he thought he saw a silent wing sweeping for his head. He ducked just in time to avoid a painful blow from her one strong muscle. As soon as the limb had passed, he jumped, his wings pinned to his side, avoiding a swipe from the mare beneath him. His left forehoof cuts against the spine for balance, and then he fell. Rainbow struggled beneath his pin. He was standing on one of her wings with one leg, and another pressed against her throat.
You fight like a griffin!
He muttered, releasing some of the pressure on her throat. Dash gasped for breath. After a few moments drinking in the stale, warm, early morning air of the palace, she looked up at the sergeant. Thanks. He stepped off her, shaking his head.
That wasn't a compliment! Griffins can swipe with their wings because they have the solid ridge of angled bones at the crest. If I were wearing my helmet when you went for that blow, my head would have been fine. You would have sat in your wing. You've got a lot to learn. We're going right now to start over from the beginning.
Right. From the beginning. Imagine what you want to create. Once you've built up the subject in your mind, feel it, sense it, explore it. Now, not just how it looks, but its feel, its smell, its weight. Clouding Mirror looked up at the mass of students in the lecture hall. His knees told him all too clearly that they wanted to be shaking. He responded with stalwart acting. Off in the corner, a patient hoof was being raised. Yes, there, in the back. What elementary charges should we be combining, Professor? As soon as the first two words were out of the young mare's mouth, the lecturer began punching his nozzle with a hoof. Everybody please stop for the moment. Please pay attention to this. He waited until the glow of his horns had subsided and his eyes were focused on him. First of all, you can call me Cloudy. I'm barely any older than you, but so you can call me Professor until I've got a beard as long as Dr. Graham is. Dr. Graham ends. Some of the class laughed, but he meant to comment sincerely. Dr. will agree or no, he was barely 28, hardly older than most of his students. Even if it was supposed to honor him, he couldn't stand being put up on a pedestal. 28, teaching a whole bunch of students? I think I relate to this guy. That's not what I stopped you for, though. I want you to all understand that illusions are an art. This isn't an advanced research course, so where your exact formula matters. You can't boil down a good illusion into a recipe and remake it over and over again. Illusions, especially really believable illusions, are fresh and alive and unique. You can't know them. You have to feel them. When everything was quiet, he broke a little smile. It seemed to be the words that he borrowed from Princess Luna were just as effective on his students as they had been on him. The thought of Luna brought new, unwelcome emotions to his mind. He glanced toward the clock on the wall in the corner, and saw something unexpected. A white coat and a blue mane covered by shining armor. And I believe that is all the time we have for today. Class is dismissed. Be sure to practice over the weekend. Most of the students rose up out of their seats, leaving him to shout over the saddlebags being stuffed with quills and scrolls. Focus on maintaining any sensory inputs you can. Next Friday's test will be graded on the number of senses you can support. Extra credit for more than 5. As the last of his pupils pushed through the doors at the back of the hall, Cloudy Mirror wiped his brow, letting his nervousness take firm over his mind. Without giving it much thought, he collapsed onto the side with small wooden stage at the front of the Royal Academy's smallest lecture hall. He was ready to fall asleep from the stress, and a little voice in the back of his mind couldn't help but remind him of the gray hairs he pulled from his mane that morning. Things were going straight to Tartarus. He just wanted to sleep through it all. After a few moments of precious quiet, he heard hooves drawing closer, echoing the hollow space beneath the hood and stage. He ignored them until they stopped, mere inches from him. He still didn't bother to open his eyes. Are you Professor Cloudy Mirror, chair of the College of Illusions? It was time to make a good impression. Did you not hear the end of the lecture? He asked jokingly. You can call me Cloudy. And to answer your question, at the moment, I am the whole College of Illusions. There was a moment of silence, followed by a simple declaration. I don't quite understand. Cloudy Mirror rose to his host, despite his rebellion. Before him stood a towering, muscle-bound unicorn clad in armor of polished amethyst and gold. Beside him stood a pink alicorn, standing about his height, but with a slender, beautiful form. I am the only illusion teacher that the Royal Academy has. I do all 5 classes. It's a pleasure to meet you, Captain Alma. The guard's host's was incredibly firm, forcing Cloudy Mirror to spread his legs and steady himself, or risk being folded into his face. You know, if you want to give me some assistance, I heard of this lovely little light blue unicorn male somewhere performing in Huffington. Her name is Trixie, I do believe. Nice to meet you. Shining Armor managed to respond. When Cloudy Mirror looked to the stallion, he saw pain and fatigue. Bags had built up under his eyes, and an obvious painful stitch adorned his shoulder. Worse though, the charcoal black stain that adorned his horn, spreading almost halfway down its length. Cloudy shuddered to imagine just what sort of spell could use so much magic, or how it could be hurt to cast it. Forcing himself to pull his gaze away from the draining mana burden of Guard's horn, he turned his gaze to his other sense. It's wonderful to meet you as well, Principessa Cadenza. She smiled in obvious appreciation of the use of her native tongue. Thankfully, she didn't respond in kind. She barely knew 24 battalion words from his trip to Naples. It is an honor to meet the youngest full mage in the history of the Academy. Unlike her husband, Cadence's greeting was fast, lively, and properly practiced. I hardly deserve that honor, Princess. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And if the rumors of your sister-in-law are true, I won't have that title much longer. Osmate Sparkle has some much better ring to it, anyway. Cadence laughed. And Cloudy joined in. but the silence that emitted from the captain of the guard unsettled him too much to actually mean it. As if sensing his unease, Shining Armor chose the end of their laughter as the perfect time to speak up.
We're here to talk to you about Princess Luna.
Part of Cloudy Mirror wanted to snap back in sarcasm at Shining Armor. He literally owed his entire life to her intervention and tutelage. Every title, position, and honor really belonged to her. Why would any pony be interested in talking to a washed-up fifth-year undergrad if not to learn about the immortal princess?
What could I help you with?
Shining looked around the room briefly. Is there somewhere more private we could talk? No sooner were the words out of the stallion's mouth than the trio of ponies were surrounded by an aura of misty green magic. An audible snap marked a familiar shift of teleportation. When the eldritch glow faded, Cloudy Mirror enjoyed the sound of gas. They were surrounded by the darkness of the void, pierced only by a countless array of stairs. A comet roared past Shining Armor's head, and in the distance, a vast nebula slowly swept past the stack of tiny planets. Where is this? Princess Cadence managed to whisper in spite of her awe. She looked everywhere, but directly at her host.
My office,
he answered, as if it were the most mundane in the world.
I won't lie.
The ambient illusion is set up to impress my guests.
It seems to be doing its job,
Shining Armor offered, accompanied by a nod from Princess Cadence.
I'm certainly impressed.
You shouldn't be. Cloudy Mirror closed his eyes and focused. A sofa and a tall back chair popped into existence, sitting smoothly on the same invisible floor on which the three ponies stood. He collapsed rather lazily into the latter seat, and gestured for his guests to make themselves comfortable. This is really easy magic, Captain. The only reason it's impressive is because nobody studies illusions anymore. You're fixing that, though, aren't you, Cloudy? Cadence prompted. Luna was teasing it. I can't do much on my own. He looked down, a shade of worry across his face. That's what you're here to talk about, isn't it? What happened at the awards ceremony? What followed was a long silence, filled with tiny emotions. Shining offered Cadence a short glance, as he responded with a tiny tilting of her head. Cloudy Mirror nervously rubbed his foreheads against one another. The princess's magic pulled a scroll and a wet quill from somewhere that the academic didn't see. Then they sat, no one speaking, until Cadence prompted her husband with a gentle poke. He shook his head as if clearing his thoughts, and then set his tired gaze on the subject. Cloudy Mirror, what I'm about to say is a matter of secrecy. He took the opportunity to gather his thoughts as his words sunk in. What you saw at the awards ceremony was an assassination attempt on Princess Luna's life by... The captain stopped when Cadence put a gentle hoof on his shoulder. Shining... I think he already knows. Cloudy Armor reflected that his lack of surprise must have given him away. Regardless, she was right. He nodded slowly. Princess Luna introduced me to a few of the Night Guard. One of them told me last night.
So you already know about Masquerade
and Rainbow Dash? Yes. There was another awkward topic, which returned Cloudy's gaze to his host. May Princess Celestia guide her way to the Summer Lands. Actually, Shining observed, with a rather positive tone, she isn't dead. Cadence taps his shoulder almost reflectively. Don't joke about... Her voice trailed off when she saw the truth in his eyes. You're serious? I spoke to her yesterday afternoon, but the crash... Shining Armor cut off the inevitable. The princess is keeping her health secret as well for the time being, though I'm not sure why. She says she told Twilight and her friends. Shining shrugged. That's an honor guard matter for now. I need to focus on catching Masquerade. That's the assassin's name, correct? A guard tilt of the captain's head gave the answer. She used some sort of magic to disguise herself as a guard's pony. Is it the alma enchanted? Or do you only hire stallions with blue manes? The jibe was one every guard's pony had heard in their day. Shining Armor didn't seem to care. Criminals like to mutter things about inbreeding and cloning. He'd grown a thick coat for the barred words, and Cloudy Mirror hadn't gone far enough to add an end to his own words. There are a few suits of enchanted armor. Most guards have put up with powdering their coats when they're on duty. That isn't. I'm sorry, Cloudy. Something got caught in my nose. Anyway, Masquerade was able to copy faces, voices. Cloudy Mirror nodded. Most of my sophomore students can do that sort of magic. For how long? The young professor furrowed his brow in thought. If she was really good, an hour. That's a little better than I could do. But when you say voices, do you mean she talked to other ponies while she was using an illusion? Not just talked. Rainbow Dash started something up, and she kept up her illusion while they were fighting. Impossible, Cloudy Mirror bluntly stated. If you're good, you can keep up an illusion while talking, but you can't seal an illusion the way you can other spells. Seal? Cadence wrapped a wing around her husband as he looked up at her scroll at Cloudy. He learned magic from the military academy. It's funny, the basic magic he doesn't know. Of course, some of the magic he can do, I can only dream of. The princess then turned her gaze away from shining armor. Sealing is when you put more magic into a spell, so that you don't have to keep focusing on it. You do it whenever you cast one of your big shields. Oh, was all the stallion could bring himself to mutter. He seemed too tired to be embarrassed by his lack of knowledge. He just looked disappointed. So you don't know how she did it? Cloudy Mirror's response was hesitant. I have an idea, but I hope I'm wrong. I guess my first question is, if any pony saw strange behavior out of... No, that's not the right way to put it. He took a deep breath, then looked straight into Shini's eyes. Did Masquerade impersonate her victims perfectly, or could anybody tell something was off, even in hindsight? Shining Armor mirrored the seriousness in the professor's gaze. No. It struck me as odd, but the only pony who noticed anything wrong was Rainbow Dash, but she isn't part of the guard. Buck! The declaration was short, loud, and kept his guest slightly stunned. After he regained his senses, his faded green chinks took a potent bless. I'm sorry. That was rude of me. What's wrong? Cadence asked. What's so bad about what Shining said? The illusionist rose up from his chair, setting his hose down on the invisible floor, amidst the stairs. There are two ways for the illusionist to create false magic. The first is what I described earlier, and what I primarily teach. We call them images, even if they aren't visual. They require continual focus, they cannot be sealed, and they are tiring over long periods. Princess Celestia banned the second method of illusion 700 years ago from the threat of crime. They're properly known as phantasms, though every text I've ever seen refers to them as nightmares. He gritted his teeth before continuing. Rather than creating an actual figment in the air, it puts a sense of directly into the target's mind. It's a much more elegant form of illusion. You can steal phantasms. They take very little focus and very little mana. However, they are incredibly dangerous. Cadence watched the pacing scholar. How? He took a deep breath. I think it's better if I just show you this. Captain Armor, will you trust me? The guard's pony rose to his host. Yes. What you're about to see, whatever you think is happening, I want you to understand that it isn't real. They'll say stop, and it'll all be over. Cloudy Mirror paced forward, and Shiny's eye raced with fear and adrenaline. What was he about to experience? The academic's horn ignited in misty green once again. He gently tightened Shining Armor's brow. Princess Cadence watched her husband, wondering just what was happening. At first, he simply stood, stock still and silent. Almost a full minute passed. Then slowly, his eyes grew wide. No! His scream was pure and primal as he clutched to his four hooves. Stop! Make it stop! Cloudy Mirror made to rush forward, where the captain was rolling on the ground in agony. However, he was stopped in place as a furious Cadence placed herself between the two unicorns. The alicorn's eyes were literally shining with rage, and her horn glowed threateningly with an intense amount of power. What did you do? Cadence yelled, wings flaring as he loomed over Cloudy Mirror. Cloudy Mirror instinctively drew back. I promise, he's fine. You're killing him! She responded. A surge of raw force flung the illusionist against the stone wall of his room, though to his eyes, he had simply stopped in the air of the cosmic void. He slowly forced himself back to his hooves, only to be lifted in the air by the same blue roar. Cadence! Stop! The shock of hearing Shining Armor's voice in the silence, left behind by his screams, was enough to shock the princess's magic away. Cloudy Mirror was dropped to the ground, where he remained with his mouth open as the captain of the guard sacredly made his way across the room. Tears matted his muzzle, yet he seemed for all the world otherwise unharmed. He had nearly reached the pair when he had almost lost his balance and fatigue. Cadence helped him back onto the couch, where his tired eyes locked calmly on the source of his pain. What was that? The most basic phantasm any illusionist can conjure. I showed you what you most feared. That spell is the reason they are called nightmares. Shining Armor brought a hoof to his face, wiping away the last of his tears. Cadence. I saw Cadence, and... The guard couldn't bring himself to finish. Cloudy looked away, unable to meet Shining Armor eye to eye. I'm sorry. To be honest, I'm amazed you broke the spell on your own. Only the most determined of ponies can do that. Couldn't you have just told him? Cadence demanded hotly, still clearly disturbed by the sight of her love's agony. This way, he'll be more resistant to the magic if he faces it again. His mind will break the hold faster, now that it knows it now. Like an inoculation, it also makes it clear what's so dangerous about phantasms. They can react to the subject and even be spread over multiple ponies. His horn illuminated, and a simple plastic tray with 2 cups of tea and a small bowl of candy settled down in midair before Shining. This should help you recover. Thanks, was all the unicorn could manage. Kane said nothing, though her quill continued to scratch notes as Cloudy Mirror continued. I suspect that this assassin, Masquerade, placed a phantasm on whoever was closest to her victim. Rather than fear, she conjured up the feeling of everything was abnormal. Whenever she did something, he paused to search for words, out of character, the phantasm would brush over the mistake on the subject's mind. As long as she didn't go too far, she could never be caught. Case looked up from her notepad, still obviously unsettled by the suffering of her husband. So, Rainbow was the only one who could see through the illusions because she didn't know the victim personally? Chimera nodded slowly. A powerful wheel can also weaken the effect of a phantasm. That's the only defense an Earth Pony or a Pegasus has. It's powerful magic, and in the wrong hooves, extremely dangerous. I guess that warning is too little, too late. Can you dispel it? Shining Armor asked. It's easy enough for a unicorn. I could teach you in no more than half an hour. The hard part is realizing you're under a spell. Something like I did is obvious. It isn't always so clear that you're under an enchantment like hers. So, what's our best chance of catching her? Cadence asked. Is there anything you could tell us? Cloudy Mirror put his eyes on his hooves. It's hopeless. With that sort of magic, you could blend in anywhere. Be any pony. You wouldn't get so much as an odd question or an odd look. If you could find her mentor, you had something. But Princess Celestia banned the teasing of phantasms a long time ago. I thought Princess and Luna and I were the only ones who knew. Well, the only ponies, anyway. You think someone else would know? Shining asked with sudden intensity. There are dragons old enough, but I had a hard time imagining any who would deign to teach a pony magic. Besides, we don't cast much the same anyway. They use their claws instead of the horns. He took a deep breath. No one else is any more likely, though. The elk are too far away and too alien to convince. The boars would never bother with magic that didn't help them fight or build or hunt. They'd sooner kill a pony rather than teach. Griffins use Pegasus magic, so that's impossible. His lips trailed on as his voice and head drooped. A grim realization settled over the room. One by one, the stars and the fog night surrounding them burnt out. By the time Cloudy Mirror's muttered words had ended, only the moon remained, floating dead still overhead. Thank you, Cloudy. Shining Armor moved to stand up, only to fall on his wife's shoulder. After gently putting away her notes, she wrapped a ring around her weakened husband. I wish I could help more, Captain. Princess, It's a pleasure to meet you. Vladimir rose to his own hooves. His horns wrapped slowly in magic for a final spell that night. With a bright burst, the three of them found themselves outside the Royal Academy, looking out at the midday streets of Canterlot. As their eyes adjusted to the sun, from the darkness of the nocturnal illusion, the academic walked up to Shining Armor's ears, and whispered a few carefully chosen words, drenched in pure, undiluted terror. If you can't save her, please, don't make me take the fall. Before the captain could respond, another burst of magic put Cloudy Mirror far away. Never before he felt so large and so threatening. The feeling made him sick. Nearly a full day later, Rainbow found herself struggling to contain a powerful urge. This urge was to shout in Thundercrack's face about how much of an idiot he was, and how he didn't know how to fight. She had beaten him hours ago if he had let her use her wings and fight the way Gilda had taught her. He thought she hurt herself, but she used the same strike on a full-grown dragon years ago, and that hadn't hurt her at all. Ultimately, the force that gave her the strength to hold back her urge came from the aching pain of the bruises covering her body. A hoof-shaped mark on her shoulder reminded her to keep her balance. A straight jab to her gut warned her to keep low to the ground. One on her neck just said, "Shut up!" She didn't feel like getting in another fight, sparring or otherwise, with the bigger, older stallion. She contented herself with sticking out her tongue as his back was turned, staring at the rack of suits of armor. The room glowed with a golden light as the single hanging lamp in the center of the ceiling bounced its light off of dozens of golden plates. Handling one gently, Thundercrack pulled down a solid black suit of armor. He probably wanted her to get mad so he could scold her, or fight again. Instead, she stated the obvious with grudging and ultimately false attempt at respect. That's everypony armor. When the sergeant turned around with a raised brow, she hastily added to proper closing utterance, Sir!
Yes, it is. Thank you, Private, for noticing the blatant obvious. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Before even giving Das a chance to respond, he turned his focus back to the racks of polished golden armor that filled most of the tiny closet. Her wings ached from the sparring bruises she earned in the process of ripping out the infirmary completely, and then subsequently destroying a small courtyard garden after the doctors had kicked them out. With assurances Luna would be looked after closely. Well, Sergeant, I'm a Pegasus. I need wing holes.
You would need wing holes if you were actually good at using your wings.
Rainbow's eyes twitched beyond her control. I'm the best flyer in Equestria. Nobody else can do the Sonic Rain Boom, and
you did a damn good job of nearly killing yourself the last time you used one of those as a guard pony, didn't ya?
The sergeant snapped.
Shut up and let me do my job. I don't tell you how to show off or shoot rainbows out of your stupid necklace.
With furious hooves, the stallion ripped a suit of armor off his rack and dropped it in front of his supposed student.
Get dressed.
Rainbow stared down at the armor in front of her, and then looked to the locked chains holding the more fitting suits of armor in place. Her gaze again returned to the wingless armor, and with a resigned sigh, she began to pull it onto her back. The back of her mind offered the only glimmer of light she could come up with. As he put up with this jerk long enough, for just a few more hours, he'd get out of her maid. Then she'd finally be able to fulfill her promise to the princess, and get out to the guard altogether. The gilded armor was a little big around her shoulders, but incredibly tight against her folded wings. She took a few tentative steps, observing the tightness of the armor. Then she glanced down to herself. To her disappointment, rather than a pure white body, she was still the same. Admittedly awesome, Cyan Mare said she always had been. Aren't I supposed to look like you, or all the other guards?
There are 12 suits.
His words cut suddenly, and his eyes drifted away lazily. When his tone finally arose again, it had lost the furious power of moments past, replaced by a slower, brooding displeasure. Daz found herself wondering if he was still mad at her, or his bubbling animosity was pointed inward.
There are 11 suits of enchanted armor. The guards who have them earn them. You rest to use powder chalk. Not that it matters. The princess wants you to look like yourself, not one of us. Now, last the armor so we can go.
She pressed the hoof against the latch of her barrel, and felt the armor lock securely in place. Okay, sir, what's next?
Dinner, and then a test. Come with me.
Thundercrack led Rainbow down the maze of the palace's hallways, offering nods to servants and guards ponies who hurried past across. They, in turn, granted him salutes, bows, and curtsies. To her disappointment, Daz garnered no recognition for the same ponies. Without her wings showing, and with the armor covering her cutie mark, she was just some guard's pony mare, a nameless face, blindly following orders. The sergeant didn't speak again until he was across the palace drawbridge and out on the streets of Canterlot.
You're probably wondering where we're going.
He was right. For her numerous past visits to Canterlot, Daz knew the palace had an ample kitchen, with countless chefs for making really great meals. Even it was hard to get a hayburger, so he learned to love a funny dish, which Twilight told her was a souffle or something like that. Why go out and pay to eat? Well, yeah, I guess, she said, feigning disinterest.
Well, I was out doing it half an hour ago, and I want a drink. So we're heading to the private reserve. It's a guards pony tavern. You can eat there, or drink, or flirt, or whatever it is you do.
I don't have any bits on me.
So it'd be a problem? There aren't many mirrors in the guard.
Rainbow felt her face turn red and threw a punch at the stallion's face. He leaned to the side, letting the blow collide with the armor back on his neck. Without even breaking stride, he smiled and let a little chuckle. What the hey do you think is so funny?
That was the first decent hit you've given me all day.
Almost immediately, he stopped laughing.
It was still garbage by our standards. Don't let it go to your head.
He continued a relative silence, sharing only the noise of the unshod hooves meeting cobblestone. The unmatched rhythms were left in glorious loneliness around the street corners and beneath the lights of the occasional street lamp. Towering spires and rounded fenders were ignored left and right, until the pair reached the poorer part of town. To Rainbow, it seemed far more natural, far more welcoming. Rough stone held together with mortar and formed straight walls, holding simple, welcoming doors and four-panel windows. Warm lights told the stories of parents returning from work and warm tables covered in food. In the young mare's mind, they brought out thoughts of a graying old stallion with a funny mustache and cheeks covered in wrinkles for smiling too much. These wonderful thoughts were burst away like the bucking of a cloud when a daydreaming Rainbow Dash walked straight into Thundercrack's back.
Pay attention, Philly! Or rather, have you embarrassed me before we even go inside?
Rainbow looked up surprisingly at the nondescript structure. Double doors were manned by a single stallion who looked like he had spent years cultivating the perfect 5 o'clock show for a grizzled axial hero. Above his head, a wooden sign with boring red letters proclaimed proudly the establishment to be the Private Reserve. The words were flanked by a pair of poorly drawn golden helmets, crested with blue hair things that Rainbow always felt were the exact opposite of awesome. She was thankful, for just a moment, that Thundercrack hadn't given her a helmet. The gratitude faded the instant Thundercrack deigned to speak to her again.
Listen up! I don't feel like saying this twice. We're going in here, and I'm going to have some drinks and meet up with whatever guards who are lucky enough to not get shipped off somewhere awful by Captain Armor. We're going to stay until I'm done drinking!
Okay, Rainbow muttered, as suspicious of alcoholism rose in her mind. Sir.
You don't have to call me sir when we're off duty, Philly. And now, the only rule is this one. If you get hurt in there, you're off the guard.
How am I going to get hurt in a bar full of guards ponies? The corner of his mouth turned in a grim perilous smile.
You're as good as guard, Philly.
Without any attempt or inclination to explain himself, Thundercrack strode up to the bouncer.
Me and the new kid are headed in.
Does she know the rules?
She's not good enough to actually break any of them. I'll keep an eye on her.
If you say so, Sarge. Thundercrack's face curled up in anger and made a distinct falseness from his earlier outburst. The bouncer looked taken aback, wondering what was about to happen. Then it hit him. The sergeant tenderly massaged the angle of his right foreleg.
Nobody calls me Sarge!
The honor guard walked down into the tavern without further speech. Rainbow was left staring at the unfortunate bouncer as he pulled himself up from the ground. He took one look at Rainbow, and with something like sympathy in his eyes, shook his head. You should get a new girlfriend, the bouncer suggested, holding a hoof against the side of his jaw. Rainbow couldn't help but laugh as he strolled into the private reserve, ready to face whatever Thundercrack could throw at her. Almost immediately, she regretted her cocksure attitude. She barely lay a hoof inside the door when she saw a glass bottle, half full of amber fluid, flying toward her face. She ducked just in time to avoid the danger, and for her trouble, felt a mixture of alcohol and backwash splash over her flank. "Hey, watch it! That was my drink!" some colt shouted at the far end of the room. Rainbow watched as a big Earth Pony guard picked up a smaller unicorn and slammed him into the table. The Pegasus filly was in trance for a while, watching as the huge pony shrugged off spell after spell, until finally the unicorn gave up fighting, with blood and drool falling from his muzzle. As if nothing happened, the Earth Pony shoved the unicorn onto the floor, fell back into his seat, and continued drinking. The scene over, Rainbow found herself able to look around and truly take in the room. It was a big area, with wood floors and stone walls. Everywhere were half-armored guards ponies, nearly all stallions. Most were partially white, with goopy spots of other colors showing where sweat and booze had wiped the chalky powder from their coats. They drank and licked salt licks, flirted with mares dressed in obviously fake armor of their own, who in turn danced temptingly from table to table, serving drinks. A very young unicorn colt with a vest and tie tended the bar. Everything was lit a warm orange, with tinted overhead lamps. The thick oak tables and a polished bar added to the scene, though not quite so much, as the dented old jukebox in the corner, which still had the tendency to belt out an old Nirvana hit. The two strongest senses to assault Rainbow, however, were the heat and the smell. The place was kept warm by a roaring fire in the corner fireplace, and the feeling was impossible to miss, compounding the summer evening heat to an almost unimaginable level. This hot, thick air was also home to some terrible stench, mixed in from 3 parts booze, 2 parts vomit, 2 parts sweat, and half a dozen other parts that this chronicle cannot mention for fear of offending reasonable audiences. Ew. Seeing nothing better to do, Rainbow made her way up to the bar and took a stool. The bartender glanced over at her, but said nothing. He was too occupied with his magic, twirling 3 bottles at once as he poured some complicated, snooty drink that Rainbow could only guess the name of. With all the ice in the little umbrella, she probably would have named it the Rarity. He slid the drink down the length of the bar with his magic. Das almost choked, trying to suppress the laughter that followed. As Master Sergeant Thundercrack looked at the funny pale drink, and then took a long, slow sip. Smug and satisfied, the honor guard stared up at the wall, carefully arranged bottles behind the bar, where his eyes lost focus on the world around him. Das managed to stifle her laughter by the time the bartender made his way over to her. A rag and a glass floated beside his head, slowly being washed off, as he looked her up and down. Rainbow gave him a look that clearly got the message across, and his eyes immediately focused on her face.
Oh, sorry, I don't. It's just that we don't get a lot of fillies in here, and I thought that you might have been one of the waitresses. But that is real armor, isn't it?
Yeah. Real stupid armor, too, Rainbow muttered. I'm a Pegasus, but Captain Jackass over there didn't seem to notice.
We have a donkey in here,
the bartender asked, incredulous. Rainbow shook her head and pointed out Sergeant Crack. Following the point of her hoof, the colt's mouth formed a small O, which was quickly replaced by a look of confusion.
You mean Saltercrack? He's a great stallion. Maybe it was just a mistake.
Maybe you hadn't spent all day beating me in the face. Rainbow gestured to the bruise she was sure had formed on the bottom right of her jaw. He doesn't like me. At all. Can't really figure out why.
What?
Shut up for a second, happy hour. Rainbow turned at the sudden interruption to see a simply familiar pony stallion sitting on the bar stool next to her.
Give me a Stettler beer and a salt lick. And a beer for the beautiful filly, too.
Upon finishing his order, the stallion turned to the mare seated beside him.
Sorry about my body earlier. It throws a bottle at a pretty thing like you.
Das then recognized him as the big Earth Pony stallion who beaten his drinking companion into unconsciousness when she entered the tavern. Her thoughts were cut short when she felt his hoof brush against the inside of her left rear leg. She twisted away from his reach and stared at him with disgusting glare. Who the hey do you think you are? Happy Hour was returning with ordered drinks when the clearly drunk stallion continued.
Oh, how old of me. Name's Flanix. Warrant Officer Flanix.
Rainbow wondered if he was actually trying to turn his title into a con main joke. He continued, ignorant of her thoughts.
If I'm moving too fast for you, I'm sorry. I love taking things nice and slow.
The words were accompanied by both his forehooves racing around Rainbow's neck, and his booze-soaked breast pressing past her face. Completely uninterested and totally disgusted, Rainbow shoved him with both her hooves. For a moment, his flailing hooves almost restored balance. Unfortunately, they were unable to rebalance the bar stool he had been resting on. Both he and the wooden fixture toppled to the floor with a pair of loud thuds. Most of the patrons didn't even look up at the noise. Flags pulled himself up onto sinking hooves, glaring daggers at Des.
Celestia, how much do you want, Philly? 80 bits? 100? You might have some fancy costume under there, but you don't say no to me.
Oh, Flanix, she's not. Happy Hour's unsteady voice was cut off when Rainbow spoke. You're disgusting. I wouldn't sleep with you for all the bits in Equestria. Her unwanted admirer twisted his head to the side, letting some loud cracks break out of his neck.
Never heard of a picking hole before.
He took a stumbling step forward, then another. I'm not a whore, jerk. I'm Rainbow Dash, Princess Luna's bodyguard.
Oh, that's funny. Real hilarious. Too bad I know a pony named Morningstar who say otherwise. But if you think you're a real guards pony, that means you know how to fight.
Rainbow could see his intentions coming a mile away. He pulled up his right forehoof and practically screened his intended attack. So he was ready to spring up on her perfect wings at a moment's notice and let him fall to his face again. He lunged, and it was at that moment Rainbow's conscious thoughts caught up with her instincts. One such thought was that her wings were still trapped beneath Earth Pony armor. The next such thought was that his leg was really strong, and his hoof really hurt. She could feel the boards of the beef beneath the paddles covering her wings. Her eyes quickly adapted to her new position, where Flanix was standing over her, a taunting smile on his ugly face.
How much now, pretty filly?
Standing over a pony like Rainbow was a mistake the stallion wasn't about to make twice, on the off chance he would recall anything at all in the morning. Des pressed her front knees onto the floor on either side of her body, giving her leverage, and thrust up forward with a powerful buck with both her hind legs. The blow connected with the underside of Flanix's nether region, and with a noise that could only be described as a slow, whimpering whine of a deflated balloon, he collapsed to the floor beside her.
Is he all right?
Happy Hour asked. When Dash sat down at the bar and grabbed the beer Flanix had brought her, Dash shrugged in response. The bartender noted and smiled awkwardly.
I'm sorry about that. Unfortunately, guards ponies aren't any different than the rest of the stallions in Equestria after a few drinks. Do you want something to eat? You know, to make it up to you.
Rainbow took a sip of the drink, and almost immediately decided she didn't like it. It was cheap and flat, everything that Sweet Apple Acres wasn't. I'd love a daffodil sandwich, if you could do that. Happy Hour nodded and quickly scrawled down a note on a little flap of paper, which his magic sent flying into the back room.
So, are you really Rainbow Dash?
The one and only fastest flyer in Equestria.
I heard all about you in the newspapers. They said you were dead. That you stopped your neck and pounded your skull when you saved the princess.
That's the first I heard, though I guess I've been hurt pretty bad too before. Princess Celestia healed me.
She could do that.
Happy Hour asked, surprised. Rainbow answered with another sip of her awful drink, then an odd look. I guess so. Secret Race is stun stuff too, right?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. But unicorns used to do that too. It just took a whole bunch of them, and some big magic gems. But there's no such thing as a healing spell at all.
Well, I guess it's something only she could do then. Rainbow took another sip, and stopped to wonder why, then pushed the drink down the bar out of her reach. That's awful. Anyway, I'm not too worried about it. There are bigger things going on.
Like what?
Des's mouth dropped open. You mean you haven't heard?
About what? Nothing has happened since the big award thing at the college. You saved Princess Luna, right? So what else is wrong?
Rainbow sat there, staring at her with his mouth open wide, until Happy Hour's eyes shifted away from the speechless mare into something, or some pony behind her. Slowly, Des turned to see 4 colts approaching. 2 Pegasi, an Earth pony, and a unicorn. The largest of the Pegasi was closest to her, and it was he who offered a smile, sans a few teeth, and spoke. "Hey, pretty fella. If I buy you a real good treat and drink, would you show me a real good time?" Daz turned back to Happy Hour, then rolled her eyes. She wasn't about to go through the whole fiasco of an argument a second time. Instead, she skipped to the end, pulling up her hind legs and bucking the stallion straight into gap-toothed muzzle. He stumbled and fell back against his friends. The unicorn reacted first, picking up Florence's abandoned drink and throwing it at Rainbow. She ducked under the flying bottle faster than most ponies would be able to follow, before putting a forehook straight into the horny giant's jaw. His magic wavered, and the bottle maintained its original trajectory, flying all the way across the room, before breaking against the head of an older, angry Pegasus with a missing ear. What followed could only be described as Discord's purest dream. Undiluted chaos erupted in the form of a bar brawl. Stools were thrown, tables were overturned, and bottles broken. The entire room went mad. Rainbow had to admit to herself it felt good to be on the giving end of some punishment after her long and awful day. She put her hose into dozens of guard ponies, dropping some, tricking others, and generally being too fast and too agile for any of the drunks to follow. It wasn't flying, but at least it was enough of an adrenaline rush to improve her mood. Finally, after a few minutes later, half the bar lay on the floor, panted, moaning, and vomiting. Things had all but stopped. Rainbow panted, feeling the weight of her armor catch up to her. Her legs were sore, but not used to doing the work of her wings. She had taken in a few light bruises, but nothing that cut her skin. In fact, she probably looked the best out of any pony out there. The cracking of glass escaped from the floor directly behind Rainbow.
How you like me now, huh?
Was Firex, and it accompanied a jagged shot of a broken ball aimed for Rainbow's face. She ducked to the side, but not fast enough. The next noise any pony heard was the sickening snap of breaking bone, followed by a hard crack as the crowed pony was thrown hard enough against the floor that he bounced, before rolling into a bloody, unconscious stop against the nearest wall. Standing over Rainbow was a large stallion, the likes of whom Rainbow had never seen before. He had turned slowly, shot a glance around the tavern with gold-slitted eyes. Vain, leathery bat wings were pinned against his sides, strange patches of fur clung to his face, marking him as a different creature entirely than a real pony, and black and purple armor covered his gray-coated body.
"What are you doing here, freak?"
some ponies shouted. Whoever the strange creature was, he simply ignored the words. His frightful eyes laid on Thundercrack, who was still sitting at the bar with his drink. "I will now be taking Lady Dash back to the palace to rest. She has passed your foolish test." The sergeant only responded with a nod, before not even mustering the will to look at the being that had addressed him. For his part, the bat stallion did not move his head. Within their sockets, however, his slitted golden eyes swiveled too quickly, riveting firmly on Rainbow. He opened her mouth to ask his name, but the words were stolen from her tongue, unspoken by his next action. Falling down on one knee, bending his other foreleg, he prostrated himself on the beer-stained wooden floorboards. "Are you well, Lady Dash?" Yeah, I guess." The stallion snapped up faster than Rainbow thought possible, without the use of his wings. As soon as he was gone through any intervening persistence, he was on the floor, and then suddenly standing stiffly before her again. "Then we shall leave. Please, follow me." The Rainbow stared in awe as he just started walking off. It took a shake of her head to close the mind of confusion for long enough to follow after him. Outside, the sun had finally set, and the midsummer's heat had faded away, leaving an uncomfortable coolness that soothed a heavy layer of sweat Rainbow only had just noticed building between her wings and her ill-fitting armor. She took a moment of refreshment to gasp a few calming breaths of fresh air, free of the sense of alcohol and testosterone. As her focus returned, her eyes veered from the strange bat-pony creature to the body of the bouncer snoring unceremoniously on the sidewalk. The black-furred being seemed to notice her glance as he sat down bluntly on the street. "He informed me I was unwelcome in this establishment because he did not deem me to be a pony." Rainbow looked at her odd protector. "Are you a pony?" "That is a very difficult question. Perhaps of the first of many. We should not talk here. Come with me to roost. I shall give you some answers you seek. My kin are not welcome in the streets. He spread his leather wings and took off, only to stop a few feet overhead. You are welcome to leave the armored guard here. That suit is easily replaceable. Part of Rainbow hesitated to follow this pony, although she had her hunch to what he was. Twilight had described 2 ponies like him after Luna visited Ponyville on Nightmare Night. She hadn't exactly believed her every word about the bat ponies, but now the description seemed to fit. It was as if he really was one of Luna's guards. He had to be trustworthy, right? The armor fell to the cobblestones surprisingly quietly. It was with immense pleasure, then, that Rainbow spread her wings and took to the night. She was tired, but the feeling of the cold air rushing past her sore body gave her a second wind like the likes of which she had never experienced before. After a dozen or so loops, she turned to look to see the night pony hovering a few yards away. We shall return to the palace to roost. There your questions can be answered, and you can rest, Lady Dash. Rainbow watched as he flew on odd wings, clumsily. He seemed to have too much power in every stroke, leaning his body to bob up and down in the cold air as he moved. Nevertheless, he was fairly fast, and the travel went quickly. Their path headed straight for the highest spire of the palace, only to pass it completely and shoot on for the peak of the mountain behind it. No structure lay there to be seen until they alighted on the bare purple rocks. The back guard walked strangely on stiff legs, darting around the rocks and over small crags in the steep ground. He stopped at the entrance to a cavern, where he looked pointedly at Dash and nodded. And Rainbow's brow rose, but she wasn't about to let him know how intimidating the dark cave was. Setting a bold foot forward, she strode into the darkness. Around her, little pinpricks of light appeared, and they glowed purple and blue, casting an eerie light around the room. Pillars of purple stone covered the silver fabric, and they spiraled up toward the towering ceiling, supporting layer after layer of walkways carved out of raw stone. Rainbow took another step for a better view, and felt plush carpet beneath her hoof. A black rug, dotted with patterns of silver stars, led her from her place at the one end of the cavern to an elevated podium at the other. At its center was an enormous gen, obviously humming and pulsating like a beating heart, accompanied by a blue light that waned and waxed with its noise. This was meant to be our Mistress of the Night's observatory. Rainbow jumped. She hadn't heard the stallion approach, despite the obvious tones her hooves had made on the stonework leading up to the carpet. Either he hadn't noticed, or he didn't care. The Sun Queen fastened it for her. Instead, it was gifted to us as a home. We call it the Roost. Rainbow looked up at the creature standing behind her, a thought a hint of pride on his face. We, like the others, like you? What are you, anyway? I am a night guard, he stated humbly, and yes, Lady Oz, your assumption is correct. We take shelter here. Rainbow shook her head. You don't get it. I know you're a night guard. I mean, what? She struggled to find the right words, a gift that often eluded her. What breed are you? Does that make sense? You asked the correct question, yet misunderstand the answer. The concept is difficult for us as well as you. Night guard is not merely my occupation, it is also my form, Lady Das. She stopped to consider the statement for a moment, before her mind locked onto another set of his words. Okay, well, you don't need to keep calling me that. I mean, I guess it's nice, but Rainbow's fine too. You sound a little stuffy when you say things like that, and it's kind of freaking me out. Forgive me. It is the nature of our kind to feel kinship with you. You alone protected our Mistress of the Night when all others were defeated. He prostrated himself again, as he had in the bar. We owe our every moment to you, Rainbow. Rainbow took a step back from the bowing night guard before her and shrugged, almost by force of habit. It wasn't a big deal, really. I'm sure the other guards' ponies would have done the same thing if they realized what was going on. He looked over her, glowing golden eyes filled with confusion. We are not so sure, Rainbow. Isn't that like their job? If you aren't going to protect the princess, what's the point of being a guard's pony? We have no doubt if the Sun Queen were to fall, they would have saved her life. Our mistress, however, does not have the loyalty that she has earned. Or ours. Well, that's kind of dumb, Rainbow answered. Loyalty isn't something you should have to earn. I would disagree with you, though in this case that may be foolish. They stared at each other. Rainbow found herself unable to interpret any emotion from the face of the night guard who stood before her. As she watched him, an obvious question arose in her mind. What's your name? He looked at her with the first emotion she could truly read, confusion. I do not. He looked around the room as if searching for something in the shadows. I am third brother. Is that a fair name? Yeah. Not as cool as Rainbow Dash, but yeah. What's with the thinking, though? Aren't you now allowed to give your real name? We are not allowed to keep a real name. Third brother is my rank, and Lancer is my duty. Either will do. Rainbow nodded, and then found herself forcing back a yawn. You're fatigued? You are fatigued? Well, yeah, I guess. But I'm not about to go to bed now. I want to know about the night guard. And you guys' armor is awesome, and this place is cool, even if it's a little creepy. And a mistress of the night would be better to answer your questions. Both time, we fear that you are the only pony who could truly save her life right now. Me? But, well, sure, I could do it, but... Quiet, Lady Das, and listen closely, for my time to our sword this night. We ask that you will not be easy, but do not misunderstand. But you can go where we cannot. Know that the night watchers watch over you from afar, and should you require us, we will come to your aid. You may find the cure of where our mistress slumbers, but only the Queen can illuminate the answer. Reconciliation and loyalty together will save our mistress. What's the haze that supposed to mean? If you know the cure... I do not know the meaning, Rainbow, only the words. Today has strained us both, for I rose against the sun to visit you. And Slitter's eyes began to glow, casting a golden light against the blues and purples of the room. Sleep now, and join our mistress for the night. Come morning, a new challenge lies ahead. Save her. The golden light filled her vision, and before she could even feel her knees to bend against the carpet, darkness and dreams overtook Rainbow's mind. Only the Sun Queen can illuminate the answer to Luna's curse. Reconciliation and loyalty together will save the fallen Night Princess.